Visual Studio is the ultimate way to build iOS, Android, and Windows applications all in C# with .NET MAUI. It makes it easy to get up and running and start developing on your local machine, but it also has rich, deep integrations directly into the IDE to boost developer productivity. Now, what does that mean? Well, it means with a single click when you're setting up Visual Studio for .NET MAUI development, it'll handle all of the SDKs, workloads, and even handles downloading and managing Android SDKs and Android emulators. You can even remotely connect to a Mac machine and have a remoted iOS simulator running on your Windows machine, and you can even deploy easily to iOS devices. What's great is that as you're developing your application inside of Visual Studio, you can get live previews, a visual tree of what elements are on the page that you're actually looking at. You can also hot reload not only your user interface, but also your code behind too. So that means as you're building your user interface with XAML or C#, you just change it, hit save, and it updates automatically. There's so much more offered inside of Visual Studio. I want to show you everything that you need to get set up and build your very first iOS, Android, and Windows apps with C# and .NET MAUI. So let's do it.
Let's go ahead and get started. I have the Visual Studio installer, which I've gotten from visualstudio.com, and it shows me all the workloads that are available when installing Visual Studio. We're going to select the .NET Multi-Platform App UI Development checkbox, which gives us everything that we need for .NET MAUI development, including the core of .NET MAUI and additional tools like the Android SDK, GitHub Copilot, and a lot more. Now, at this point, everything will be downloaded that I need for .NET MAUI, and go ahead and install all of the packages on my machine. Now, of course, based on your internet connection speed and your machine speed itself, this could take a few minutes. I've gone ahead and sped this up a little bit so we can get straight to the code. What's great about this is that with one click, we're getting everything that we need. And just like that, we're ready to build our first .NET MAUI application by launching Visual Studio. Now, I've already installed Visual Studio before, so I see my projects. So you might have nothing there. So let's select Create New Project. In the top right of the filters, we can scroll down to MAUI. That's going to show us all of our .NET MAUI project templates. We're going to select the first one, .NET MAUI App. Selecting Next gives us a few options for a project name, so I'm going to call this My MAUI App. And then we can also select the version of .NET we want to use and optionally include sample content. This is a really beautiful, stunning to-do application, so definitely give it a look. Well, we're going to use the standard single-page application out of the box. And with one click, this will go ahead and create my entire .NET MAUI project and everything that I need to get started. Here, there is some great documentation and beginner videos to get you started with .NET MAUI, but you can go deeper on how to build and use different controls, integrate data, and deploy to different platforms. Let's take a look at the Solution Explorer here. This shows us the different dependencies for Android, iOS, Mac, and Windows from a single project. And here we have some properties like launch settings, platform folders to write platform-specific code, and of course, even resources that are multi-platform, so app icons, fonts, images, splash screens, and different styles. And we'll come back to them in a second. Here's a few XAML files and our MAUI program.cs, which is the main startup of our application. Here we can see that a MAUI app is being created. It uses the app itself, configures some fonts, and adds debug logging to our application. Our app is the main startup. Here it is defining a few shared resources, so the styling of our application. Under colors, we have some base colors. Here we have some .NET Purple, but you can use these and change these at your liking. .NET MAUI controls are also styled by default with the styles.xaml, including adding light theme and dark theme support right out of the box. And of course, it's fully customizable. In the drop-down code behind of our app.xaml, we can see that a new window is created, and there's multiple windows that you can create inside of .NET MAUI applications, which is great for a desktop application. This is creating an app shell, which is sort of a shell of our application, and this is great where we can have things like tab bars or flyout menus inside of them. Here we just have a single piece of shell content, which is our main page. This main page is what will be displayed. It has a scroll view with a vertical stack layout, and it's going to lay down images, labels, and buttons. Each of these have different properties on them, like text and styles, and even our button here has a name and a click event on it, which is incrementing the counter and updating the label itself. Here in the debug dropdown, we can select the target framework and different devices as well. I always recommend getting started right on Windows because it's super fast and starts to deploy directly on your machine and a debug session. Now, the only thing that you need to do is make sure you turn on developer mode in the settings application. And once you do that, you'll be able to deploy your application immediately. If you don't have that on, Visual Studio will let you know. All right, here is our Hello World Welcome to .NET MAUI application. And it has a button that says Click Me. We can click it and we can see that the counter updates in real time. We can resize it. And what's this? A XAML live preview, a live preview of our running application. What's great here is that we can hover over different elements, and when we tap on one, it will navigate us directly into the code. Using hot reload, we can change any of the properties and it'll update instantly. This is really, really nice from developer productivity perspective, and we can see that it's reflected in our actual running application. Now, beyond this, we're also able to update the C# code behind too. So let's change this count to +=10. Up top, we see this little flame hot reload icon. We can just simply tap on it or check that checkbox. So when we save the file, hot reload is applied. And now we can see that our counter is being incremented by 10 every single time. Again, productivity packed right in. In the live previewer, we can add grid lines so we can refine our application. And we can also pop out the live property explorer to see all the properties on different items, such as the label here. And since we're running on Windows, we have a full diagnostic so we can see events, memory usage, and CPU usage as well. Now there's a lot more packed into Visual Studio, but let's start to explore running our application on other operating systems. I'm going to change the framework here to Android. And we can see that the Android Emulator button popped up. I'm going to tap on this, and we can see that we get an error. And it's telling me that I need to install some Android SDKs. Now, to save time on the installation, and because SDKs get updated over time, they are downloaded and installed on demand. And Visual Studio will walk you through that entire process, which it's doing for me here now. And after you have consent, it will go ahead and install it for us. Perfect. Now we're ready to deploy it again. Here, when I tap Android Emulator, we can see that I don't have any. So Visual Studio recommends I create a new default Android device. This will automatically download, unpack, and get our Android emulator set up. There are a lot of different ways of getting optimized Android emulators, and I'll make sure to put links in the show notes below so you can dive into documentation. All right, our Android emulator is now set up, and we can see it reflected directly inside of Visual Studio in the debug window. If you have multiple emulators or you plug in your physical Android device, you'll see it here in the list. So here's my Android emulator. Now all I got to do is hit debug, and my Android emulator is automatically launched and started up for me. Again, based on your machine, this may take a few seconds or up to the minute the very first time you go ahead and deploy. Now, once it's here, we've gone ahead and actually packaged up our entire application and deployed it to the Android emulator or your physical device that's plugged in, and boom, there is our application running, and we get the live preview inside of Visual Studio. Here we can see our code changes are still being applied. I can use that live preview to jump directly into the code, and we can go ahead and add, for example, new labels into our application. And we can now see that we have hello.NET MAUI twice, for example, which is awesome. We can also go in and then, of course, change the second one to say, hello Android. And this is reflected in our running application in our emulator, which is awesome. Now, beyond that, we can also toggle light theme and dark theme support directly from the Android emulator dropdown menu. So let me go ahead and open that up here so we can see it updated. Here we go. I'll just toggle over here. And there we go. Let me go ahead and turn on dark mode, and we can actually see it reflected in the live preview faster than I can get back to the running application. And that again is coming from that styles, which is really awesome to see. Now let's deploy this to iOS. The first thing I'll need to do is connect to my Mac on my network. I can do this from this little icon or go into Tools, Android or iOS, and under iOS, we see Pair to Mac. This will allow me to pair my Windows machine to my Mac and do a remote SSH connection to actually do a remote compilation and deployment to a remoted iOS simulator. Here, I've configured my MacBook Air, and Visual Studio will automatically install any of the required components that are needed. Now, on my Mac, I will need to install Xcode, and I will need to have the iOS simulators installed as well. Now I can go ahead and from the dropdown select my framework to iOS. And here I can see the iPhone SE simulator has been selected. From the dropdown, I have remote devices and the simulators as well. So if I plug an iPhone into my Mac, it'll show up here. There's a bunch of different simulators on my Mac, and that's what it's being pulled from. I'm going to go ahead and deploy it to this iPhone SE running iOS 18.4. Now, what's really cool here is it's doing that with full remote compilation on my Mac and then starting a full simulator on my Mac. And then the remoted iPhone simulator will come up directly on my Windows machine. This is true magic. I absolutely love this. And I'm here on my Surface, so I also get full touchscreen support. So there's the build, and now our simulator has been started. This will connect to the server, and just like that, our simulator is now directly here on my Windows device. The first time you boot up your simulator, it may take a few seconds, but after that, you'll be directed directly in to iOS. And here it is. Here is the iPhone SE simulator running iOS 18.4. Now I can swipe through it because I'm on my touchscreen, my Surface device, and automatically Visual Studio will install my iOS application onto that simulator. And here we go. Our launch screen is up, and what we'll see is our full .NET MAUI application. And at the same time, all of that same exact tooling, including the live preview, continue to work directly inside of Visual Studio. The remoted iOS simulator has a bunch of different capabilities, including creating screenshots, rotating the device, and simulating Touch ID. And you can even set geolocation, or use your keyboard as well. And of course, we can use hot reload and see it directly updated inside the simulator. And just like that, we built our very first .NET MAUI application with Visual Studio.
Our local development machine is all set up, and we started to build, test, and debug our very first iOS, Android, and Windows applications, all with C#, .NET MAUI from Visual Studio. Hope that you found this getting started video helpful on your journey to build mobile and desktop applications with Visual Studio. Be sure to browse the documentation to continue your learning journey.